Welcome back to the Michael and Dando show. I'm on the line with Darren Cheeseman, local Labor representative. Mr. Cheeseman, how are you tonight?
Very well.
So we're here tonight. You've graciously agreed to talk with us about the carbon tax. There's just some things that, I'm not entirely sure on what exactly they mean, and I'm going to make the assumption and mean that some of Joe Public are in the dark as well.
Sure.
So just starting off, a lot of numbers are going around at the moment and things, this many billions of dollars are going to be raised, this amount of, tax money is going to be cut and things like that. So really my question is, the Prime Minister said that 90% of people that are going to see an increase in their living costs are also going to get a tax cut to offset that. Is that correct?
No, what she's saying is 9 out of 10,
Yep.
which is 90% of Australians, are going to receive compensation via either tax cuts or pension increases or Centrelink payments.
Yeah.
That money is going to be raised, of course, via the carbon pollution tax, which is going to be levied against the 500 largest carbon pollution emitters.
Yeah, and that's going to, because what's been said is, I'm not sure how many billion was it. I think it might have been in the teens of $1 billion. This carbon tax is going to fund that amount of money in clean energy research. Is that about right?
Well, there's the money is going to be used in a number of ways.
Yeah.
Firstly, more than 50% of the money will be used to provide, of course, the tax cuts and increases to pensions and the like. There's also going to be a component of that money that will be used to support new clean technology investment and a clean technology investment fund.
Yeah.
Particularly of benefit to companies in the Geelong region whom are heavy manufacturers. But there's also going to be money put aside for investment in food technology companies. Of course, in our part of the world, you would expect dairy companies in the southwest to apply for money for potential projects to reduce their carbon pollution. There'll also, of course, be a number of other mechanisms put in place that will very much assist the take-up of renewable energy technology. In Western Victoria, of course, there's a very rich source of potential renewable energy from Portland through to Geelong in terms of wind energy.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's where I myself am getting confused. And look, it may just be me, but with so much, I've had a look at the estimator that was put online to say, it's going to affect your level of living like this.
Yes.
And it estimated for me $9 a week. And then it also estimated that my tax exemption was going to be about $10.20 a week. So I'm actually one of the people that's going to probably benefit from this. That being said, though, if the big companies are passing on their extra cost to the consumers, and that's going to, in my case, going to cost me $9 a week, and the government's going to offset that by giving me $10 a week, where's the government getting any money to do all this funding if all of it's going out in tax cuts?
Well, all of the money raised from the 500 largest emitters, all of that money is used to fund the program. As I said to you earlier, more than 50% of that money raised will go to tax cuts and the like.
Yeah, okay.
What this scheme will ultimately do is provide people financial assistance to make decisions in their own lives in terms of how they might buy products that have a lower embedded carbon footprint. And you'll have, of course, in your daily life, you'll have opportunities, whether it be down at the supermarket when you're buying the next light bulb, to, of course, buy light globes that use less electricity. Of course, those things are on the market now, but of course they do cost a little bit more.
Yeah.
Having more compensation in your pocket will enable you, as a consumer, to make choices in the way you live your life and the products that you use so that you can make active choices to reduce your carbon footprint and have the money to do that. Now, of course, if people don't want to buy lower carbon footprint products, of course, that's their decision too. But you will have the financial assistance from the Commonwealth to do that via those tax cuts and the like. And as you've clearly indicated, your situation, your circumstances, you'll be in front.
Yeah.
You're being compensated more than any potential costs that might be pushed through to you from those heavy emitters that you might rely upon for your daily life.
Yeah, and actually now that you've said it, that it explains it. I've been looking at it as a, money goes out, money comes in, but there's that third step again of money goes out buying smarter products. So that kind of makes more sense to me at this stage.
Well, that's right, and that's what when it comes down to the simplest thing, that's what it's all about. I've also heard very good examples used in terms of the rubbish recycling schemes that were introduced throughout Victoria some 10 or so years ago now, where, of course, we had to pay a little bit more for the provision of the yellow lid bins, recycled products. But, of course, once we got used to it, our lifestyles adjusted, and we did find that we didn't need as large a rubbish bins. Well, in this instance, what we're asking the 500 largest emitters to do is to simply pay for the pollution they release into the atmosphere, which is causing dangerous climate change. And we're putting in place $23 charge per tonne of emissions that they release.
Yeah.
Now, smart businessmen, of course, will then start making decisions about how they will release less pollution into the atmosphere. So this whole arrangement that we'll be putting in place is around encouraging the large emitters to reduce their carbon footprint and providing financial assistance for consumers to, of course, buy products that have a smaller embedded carbon footprint. And, of course, the Productivity Commission identified that a cap-and-trade system, which is where we're moving to, is a far better way, far more efficient way to reduce our carbon footprint than the approach that Tony Abbott, for instance, is suggesting, which is that he will charge you and I as consumers and pass that money on to employers, the large emitters, for them to introduce new technologies so that there's a smaller carbon emission.
Yeah.
That approach has been used elsewhere in the world, and it is more expensive, and it puts a financial impost directly onto consumers. We, of course, want those that pollute to pay, not consumers.
Yeah, definitely.
That's what we're going. That's what we're on about.
And it's really convenient that you mentioned both the fact that different methods have been used in different countries and the environment in that sentence there, because I did want to quickly talk about both of them. Now, Liberal pretty much came out straight away after the announcement and said that the goals that have been set, if they're achieved by 2020, it will affect the climate by reducing it 1/4,000th of a degree. Now, is that number at all accurate, or is this just more political spin?
Well, no, it is more political spin. Of course, Tony Abbott hasn't been able to maintain a consistent argument, a consistent position on this. Every day he has a new argument, a new line, and by the end of the day, we've, of course, put comprehensively to bed his argument of the day.
Yeah.
The reality is that we, along with the rest of the world, need to take action to stop the worst excesses of dangerous climate change. We're, of course, making our contribution via the cap-and-trade system that we've been talking about in this nation for a number of years. And in fact, at the 2007 election, both the opposition leader, Kevin Rudd at that point, and the Prime Minister, John Howard, went to the election with a cap-and-trade system because it was seen in a bipartisan way that was the most efficient, most effective approach to reducing our carbon footprint and dangerous climate change as a consequence. Tony Abbott, of course, has chopped and changed his position constantly. He believes that putting regulation in people's lives is the best way to reduce dangerous climate change. But he also, in the same breath, has famously described climate change as absolute crap.
Yeah.
You can't have it both ways.
Mm-hmm.
Climate change is a great threat to all of us. We as a government, we as a country do need to put our shoulder to the wheel, along with the rest of the world. And the rest of the world is moving. The rest of the world is taking steps to address climate change and carbon emissions in their own countries through a variety of different mechanisms. The mechanism we've chosen for Australia is the most efficient way, and that's why we're proceeding down this path.
Yeah. So if that number of 1/4000th of a degree is just political spin, is there a more accurate number out there, or are we just taking the carbon, trying to keep the carbon out of the atmosphere and hoping for a better tomorrow?
Well, no, this is certainly not a hope exercise. The climate change scientists are saying that we need to dramatically across the planet reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, because if we don't, we will see dangerous climate change over the course of the next 100 years. So the rest of the world is taking action.
Yep.
Hopefully the cumulative effect of all of that action is that we remove sufficient greenhouse gases from our atmosphere to stop dangerous climate change. The science is very clear that greenhouse gases, because of the industrialisation of the planet over the last couple of 100 years, has warmed the planet, and we need to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, because if we don't, the planet will continue to warm in a very dangerous way.
Yeah, and so that kind of puts to bed the cyclical, we've had ice ages in the past, and then obviously the Earth has heated up to deal with those. And I guess that's what the original argument was, climate change is a joke, we live in a cyclical planet.
Well, we do live in I have a background in geology. We of course, live on a planet
mm-hmm.
That goes in and out of ice ages, and that will continue to take place.
Yeah.
What we're talking about is changing the climate because of human activity,
mm-hmm.
And all of the mapping and research undertaken by climate change scientists is confirming that we, because of industrialisation, because of the greenhouse gases that have been emitted because of industrialisation of this planet, are in a situation now where we are changing the planet's climate.
Yeah.
And we need to, of course, take steps to, of course, reduce that pollution going into the atmosphere so that we don't have dangerous climate change. Now, in our part of the world, that means taking full advantage of renewable energy. And of course, as I've mentioned, through southwest Victoria, there is a very rich asset, a very rich opportunity for us to put in wind farms,
mm-hmm.
To help, of course, develop renewable, clean energy that will directly assist Victoria in reducing its dependency on brown coal that produces an enormous amount of greenhouse gases.
Yeah, it's definitely not a clean energy there. Now, we talked earlier about Mr. Abbott not having a staunch standing point in opposition to this. I can think of one that has pretty much not changed, at least not that I've heard about. He's pretty much saying, no one else in the world is doing this. Why do we think we're smarter than everyone else? Why do we think we're smarter than everyone else?
Well, I think we are actually a very smart country.
Mm-hmm.
I think that shouldn't be disputed.
Yeah.
The reality, though, is we're not acting alone. Europe has an emissions trading scheme. New Zealand has an emissions trading scheme.
Mm-hmm.
South Korea, where I was a couple of weeks ago, is currently putting through their parliament an emissions trading scheme. And from what I understand from briefings from both the main political parties there, the government and the opposition, there's bipartisan support for it.
Yeah.
Both political parties recognise in South Korea that an emissions trading scheme is the most efficient way to reduce greenhouse gas emissions.
Well,
so the rest of the world is acting.
Yep.
The United States, in 11 states, there is an emissions trading schemes in place. Of course, the President of the United States proposed one, but with frustration from the Congress, he wasn't able to get one through. But his position still is that an emissions trading scheme is the most efficient and best way to reduce greenhouse gas emissions.
Now, unfortunately, I'm one of those people that at school I slept a great deal through social studies and whatnot. So when you say an emissions trading scheme, what does that mean? Because Tony Abbott's saying no other country in the world taxes per tonne of emission. Is that accurate, or is, again, more spin? Is it countries doing different things and then calling it the same thing, or what's the go there?
No, a cap and trade system, which is effectively an emissions trading scheme, that's the model we're proposing in Australia.
Yep.
All of the European Union is subject to that.
Okay.
And it is reducing their greenhouse gas dependency, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
What it effectively means is that polluters need to pay for the emissions they release into the atmosphere, and they can go about offsetting their emissions by introducing new technologies into the workplace which offset the levy that they have to pay to the government for the emissions they release into the atmosphere.
Definitely. And look, after, as I said, I was a little confused about this, and, you're really giving us to it in simple terms, and I do thank you for that. I do just have one last question in regards to businesses. The tax is, they're saying by 2020 it will obviously reduce emissions, and the hope there is that it's because businesses have taken up smart energy. However, what about small businesses that can't afford to do this and then can no longer compete, and international businesses that don't have to and can just leave, for example, Ford?
In terms of small businesses, of course, depending on the nature of small business, but their dependency on electricity can vary, but it can be through taking little steps, such as changing light bulbs to more efficient light bulbs that use less electricity. It could be insulation, it could be reviewing the style of heating and cooling they have in their offices or shop fronts, to take up new technology. Now, of course, you're not going to expect new businesses or existing businesses to take every step immediately. Of course, they're going to, as you would expect, replace plant and equipment as it wears out.
Definitely.
And they were, the opportunity and choice is, once it's worn out and needs to be replaced, to pick technology that is the most efficient in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, and that could be to convert from an electric heating unit to a gas heating unit.
Yeah.
For instance, gas has embedded in it a smaller carbon footprint than that of electricity, which is predominantly brown coal. Or it could be to change power providers from brown coal to 100% sourced renewable.
Yeah, yeah.
A raft of things that small businesses can do, which is not only good for them economically, but it's also good environmentally.
Yeah, definitely. And say, example, for those big international businesses that do have other options, and this is kind of a selfish question because I actually work for one, a large call centre in Melbourne with Manila offices and other offices overseas. Is this tax not going to make it just... I mean, the labour's already cheaper in Manila. If the operating costs are going to be more in Australia, what's the incentive for them to just not pack up and leave 7,500 people without a job?
Well, I certainly, and all of the modelling actually suggests that there will be actually an increase in employment opportunities rather than a decrease. As I've said earlier, businesses, of course, can make decisions in terms of the technologies that they employ, the type of heating and lighting and all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
Now, ultimately, it's not necessarily the responsibility of the small business or the large business, because often they have a landlord.
Yep.
And the landlord will need to, of course, take the necessary steps to reduce heating and cooling of their buildings,
mm-hmm.
because if they don't, then you'll find businesses will move to other locations within the same city where they can get where they can heat a building or cool a building at a cheaper price.
Definitely.
So you would certainly expect landlords to take necessary steps to reduce
mm-hmm.
The energy costs of a building, because if they don't, they'll find their tenants going to other locations within the same city.
Yeah.
And that's what I would expect. I would expect landlords to take the responsible decision, because at the end of the day, if you've got a tenant, you can make money. If you don't have a tenant, then of course it's difficult to make money.
Exactly, yeah.
The economy will, and the marketplace will sort that out.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to talk to you, and I do look forward to, as the debate goes on, if we could contact you again, that would be great.
My pleasure.
All right, thank you very much, Representative Cheeseman.
Good evening.
Good evening.